In this video, I want to talk about 3 finesse techniques that dominate in the fall. I think that over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking a lot more about fall fishing. I talk a lot about power fishing, spinner baits, jigs, Alabama rigs, crankbaits, and I absolutely love to do that. But in the fall, there's a couple of techniques that are finesse techniques, and they can absolutely catch the most fish and the biggest fish in your lakes. And so in this video, we're gonna talk about that. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by my apparel company, Fin Fishing. Right now for the month of October 2024, I'm running a package deal on the website. You can get a USA made sun shirt, one of the only ones made in the US, little flag over here, and a bass hat with a wooden bass badge for $67. So it's really easy. All you gotta do, add the sun shirt that you want to cart, add the bass hat that you want to cart, and you will see that automatic discount at checkout. Shopping at Fin Fishing is truly the best way to help support this channel, and I greatly appreciate all of you who have done so. All right, let's talk about these 3 finesse techniques. Like I said, a lot of lakes across the country, these ones are going to happen on. They tend to be a little bit better in clear water lakes, but I'm not saying that you can't do this in stained water as well. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to finesse fishing is a Ned Rig, okay? A Ned Rig, we all know, is a dominant bait. Like, ever since Ned Rigs really became popular, anglers have been using them and catching fish everywhere with them. And I bring this little story up all the time because I think it shows just how powerful a Ned Rig is. I remember fishing a tournament down in Florida on the Harris chain of lakes. And when you're down there fishing in Florida, you're not thinking about Ned Rigs a whole lot. And I remember fishing against a guy who was from Minnesota. And guess what? We were fishing in similar areas, but he was fishing a Ned Rig, I was fishing a big Texas rig, and we both did well in that tournament, but it blew my mind how many big fish that he had caught on a little 3-inch Ned Rig. And it was just a great tournament for him. And it always just lets me, like, it always in the back of my mind, I always think of Ned Rigs kind of being like a finesse technique that gets a lot of bites. But the truth about a Ned Rig is it can catch some absolute giants. And in the fall, you see this a lot. As that water temperature really starts to get cold, one of the best techniques that there is a Ned Rig. A Ned Rig is such a do-nothing lure that it, to me, excels in cold water. I've caught bass in like the coldest water you can with a Ned Rig. And so this is a technique that I'm gonna pick up and I'm gonna fish it a little bit of everywhere. You know, I fish it a lot on rocks. I fish it if I'm around smallmouth. You can fish it in wood, but you do have to rig up your Ned Rig to be a little bit more weedless. But it is a great technique, and although we know that everybody knows about the Ned Rig and a lot of people throw them, it's still a really good bait, and it still has a very good place in the fall. Now, the other thing that's important and why a Ned Rig can be so good in the fall is also because bass start to feed a little bit more on crawfish during the fall. As that water temperature starts to come down, there's also a fall crawfish spawn that will happen. And so bass will start to seek out eating crawfish. Although they do eat bait fish and stuff like that, they do eat crawfish a little bit more. And a great bait to mimic a crawfish is like a green pumpkin Ned Rig. Now, I know that it doesn't have the arms like a crawfish did, but did you know that Berkeley did a study and actually they took, this is interesting to me, they took the pinchers of a crawfish, cut one off, the bass actually ate the one with one arm better, then they cut both off and the bass ate that one the best. So a crawfish with no arms, to me, looks exactly like a Ned Rig, and that's why it gets absolutely eaten up. Now, let's talk about technique number 2. And this is one that it is a little bit more, it's not gonna necessarily work everywhere, but in the places it works, man, it's a great bait, and that is a blade bait. A blade bait is a great technique. It starts to really start to dominate in the fall. Now, I will say that if you have smallmouth bass, you should absolutely pick up a blade bait, because the blade bait, there's something about a blade bait in smallmouth, they absolutely love it. With that being said, I've caught a ton of largemouth on a blade bait, even in some of those exact same smallmouth areas before. Now, a blade bait, the biggest thing that you should know about that bait is really how you work it, especially in colder water. Because the colder the water you get, kind of the more lethargic and less aggressive you want to work that bait. And as a matter of fact, I work a blade bait a lot in the fall, kind of like I do a jig, where I'm going to cast that bait out, the blade bait. I'm going to let that blade bait fall to the bottom, and I'm literally just going to rise that bait up about a foot off the bottom and then let it fall back down. And then sometimes I'm going to let it sit there for a second, and then I'm going to rise it up, let it fall back down. And every time you rise it up, you will feel that blade bait engage, and you'll feel it go and then it falls and then it falls. And I'm telling you what, this is such a overlooked and deadly technique in cold water. If you have areas of the lake where maybe you have a hard bottom, like it works really good around rock, although you will get snagged. It even works around like stumps and brush piles, but look, you're throwing a blade bait with treble hooks. It's going to get snagged. So just know that you're going to lose some blade baits out there, but it is just such a deadly technique. And I honestly don't know what it is about it, but in cold water, the colder the water gets, the better that blade bait bite gets. And it is so, so good. You can catch so many fish on it, and it's fun. There's two ways that I do want to mention real quick that a bass eats a blade bait. The one is going to be on the initial fall, or not on the initial fall, but when the bait is falling. So when you rise that thing off the bottom, you'll feel it go and if a bass hits it fairly aggressively, he's going to hit it on the fall. So as it sinks, you'll feel punk like that. And all you do, start reeling and kind of lean backwards. The other way that you get bit is it just feels like you hung into the bottom. Like you raise that thing up, and I don't honestly get how bass eat it this way. That thing hits, it feels like it hits the bottom. You go to raise it up again, and you've lost feeling, and there's weight there. Like all of a sudden, it's just, there's a fish there. So you just, again, start reeling, lean back into them. Those are the ways that a bass eat a blade bait. It is a deadly technique. Now, the last technique, the third technique, this is one that I don't want to say it's a controversial way of catching fish, but I think a lot of people don't like it because you do use forward-facing sonar a lot with this particular technique, and that is a jig head minnow. This bait can be great all summer long, but it definitely excels in a little bit colder water. You definitely seem to fish it and have bass that are committing to it better in colder water. And it's one that I absolutely pick up a lot during the fall. Now, the big thing with this technique, it is more of a technique that you use with forward-facing sonar, but you do not have to. If you want to go out there, cast this bait out, this is the way that I would suggest doing it. Cast the bait out, let it go all the way to the bottom, and then just start the retrieve, which is a very slow wind, and you're constantly kind of jiggling your rod tip, okay? And really what you're gonna do is try to trace the bottom. Now, you don't know where that bait is, but this is the way that we fished for years. You know, like tracing the bottom is you basically, you're working that bait, and like if you go about 10, 15 seconds, just all of a sudden open up your bail and let that bait fall back to the bottom. And you're gonna find out how far off the bottom you pulled that bait. Sometimes you'll realize, man, I really pulled it way far up. I was reeling too fast. In that case, you want to start slowing down. Other times, you'll be hitting the bottom and you realize you need to speed up. So, like I said, this is the way that we used to fish baits all the time in the past. If you have forward-facing sonar, it's really easy because you can see your bait down there. But every now and then, this is the other thing that I would suggest. One time per cast, I would engage that reel and I would just start reeling it a lot faster, like mid-cast. Just start reeling it a lot faster and then just kill it. Because what I've seen with using forward-facing sonar is that if a bass is tracking this bait and you really start reeling that bait faster and get that bait to lift upwards, that is when he's gonna come up there and get it. So if you can't use forward-facing sonar, just do that anyways, and you will find that you will catch fish on that rise. So guys, those are the 3 finesse techniques that absolutely dominate, catch a lot of fish. Hope you enjoyed this one. I will see you tomorrow.